coffee was still steaming when they hit my yard like a SWAT team. 6 in the morning, November frost coating everything silver, and I'm standing at my kitchen window watching these 4 guys in coveralls jump out of a white landscaping truck. No knock on the door, no, "Hey, excuse me." Just straight to work with shovels and a mini excavator, tearing up the flower bed my Sarah planted 3 years ago. The same bed where she'd kneel every spring, dirt under her fingernails, humming some old song I never could remember the name of. "Hey!" I shouted, bursting through my front door in nothing but pajama pants and slippers. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The foreman, a stocky guy with a clipboard, didn't even look up. He just pointed to an official-looking document fluttering in the morning wind. Homeowner Association order. Your landscaping doesn't meet community standards. Mandatory replacement required. I snatched the paper from his hands. The letterhead was legit. Our HOA logo, fancy border, the works. But the signature at the bottom made my blood run cold. Karen Drake, president. That woman had been gunning for me ever since I moved in 2 years ago. "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. $4,200, the foreman said, revving up some kind of soil aerator. Payment will be automatically debited from your HOA account. $4,000. $4,000 for flowers that were perfectly fine yesterday. I stood there watching them destroy Sarah's garden, piece by piece. The purple petunias she'd special ordered from some nursery in Oregon. The little stone border she'd arranged by hand, each rock placed just so. They were ripping it all up, like it was weeds. You know what the worst part was? I couldn't stop them. Seed, clipboard. That clipboard gave them legal authority, and I knew it. I'd been around enough bureaucratic nonsense in my 20 years as a county inspector to recognize when someone had their ducks in a row. "This is insane," I muttered, pulling my phone out to call someone, anyone, who might help. But who do you call at 6 a.m. when your neighbors are destroying your dead wife's memorial garden? That's when I saw her, Karen Drake herself, climbing out of a silver sedan parked across the street. Even from a distance, I could see that smug smile plastered across her face. She was a big woman, not just tall, but wide, like she took up more space in the world than she deserved. Bleached blonde hair pulled back tight, wearing one of those business suits that screamed, "I'm in charge here." She walked over with this lawyer-looking guy in tow, both of them surveying the destruction like generals inspecting a battlefield. "Morning, John," Karen called out in that fake sweet voice of hers. "Sorry about the early start, but we wanted to get this taken care of before the real cold hits." "Karen, what is this about?" I tried to keep my voice level, but my hands were shaking. Whether from cold or rage, I couldn't tell. "Your landscaping violates Section 12.4 of the Community Aesthetic Guidelines," she said, like she was reading from a script. "We held an emergency board meeting last week and voted unanimously for immediate remediation." "What emergency meeting? I never got any notice." Karen's smile got wider. "All notifications were sent via email, John. We can't be held responsible if you don't check your messages. Seed, email." The lawyer stepped forward, extending a business card I didn't take. "Mr. Harris, my client has been more than generous with the timeline here. Most associations would have imposed additional penalties for non-compliance." I looked at this guy. Expensive suit, manicured nails, the kind of attorney who probably charged $300 an hour to intimidate people like me. "What penalties?" "Well," Karen said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through something, "there's the original landscaping fee, plus administrative costs, plus a compliance review fee." She paused dramatically. "But let's not worry about that right now. The important thing is getting your property back up to community standards." Behind us, the excavator was grinding through Sarah's rose bushes. The sound was like fingernails on a chalkboard, metal teeth chewing through roots that had taken years to establish. Have you ever watched someone destroy something irreplaceable right in front of you and realize there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it? That hollow feeling in your gut, like someone reached inside and scooped out everything that mattered? That was me, standing in my driveway at 6:15 in the morning, watching Karen Drake's hired guns turn my wife's memory into a pile of dirt and broken stems. The worst part? This was just the beginning. The excavator's engine died, leaving nothing but the sound of my own breathing and Karen's heels clicking on my driveway. Now, John, she said, smoothing down her blazer like she'd just finished a pleasant conversation about the weather. The new landscaping should be completed by Thursday. Very tasteful. Boxwood hedges, standard grass seed, maybe some seasonal annuals if you're lucky. I stared at the crater where Sarah's garden used to be. 3 years of growth, gone in 30 minutes. The soil looked violated, torn up and scattered like someone had taken a giant spoon to it. This is completely insane, Karen. Those flowers weren't hurting anybody. That's where you're wrong. She gestured broadly at the neighboring houses. Property values, John, curb appeal. When prospective buyers drive through here and see creative landscaping choices, it affects everyone's investment. Creative landscaping choices. That's what she called my wife's memorial garden. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Harris, you do have the right to appeal this decision at the next board meeting, third Thursday of every month, 7 p.m. at the community center. When's the next one? I asked. Karen checked her phone again. Oh, that was last night, actually, but don't worry. There's another one in 4 weeks. Of course, the work will be completed and billed by then, but you're welcome to voice any concerns. 4 weeks. By then, Karen's people would have planted their cookie-cutter shrubs and sent me a bill that would probably drain what was left of my savings account. You can't just... Actually, we can. Karen's fake smile never wavered. It's all in the HOA covenants you signed when you purchased the property. Section 12 covers aesthetic standards, Section 15 covers enforcement procedures, and Section 23 covers cost recovery. She rattled off those numbers like she'd memorized them, like she'd been planning this conversation for months. I want to see those covenants, I said. Of course, they're available online. Just log into the resident portal with the email address we have on file. Payoff. Email. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You do remember updating your contact information when you moved in, don't you? I didn't. Sarah had handled all that paperwork back when she could handle things. After the funeral, I'd been lucky to remember to pay the mortgage, let alone update some HOA database with my email address. I'll need a printed copy, I said. Oh, we don't do printed copies anymore. Environmental responsibility, you understand. Everything's digital now. The foreman was loading equipment back onto his truck, probably heading off to destroy someone else's life before lunch. Karen watched him work with the satisfaction of someone who just crossed another item off her to-do list. Is there anything else, John? I have a busy day ahead of me. Yeah, there's something else. I stepped closer, close enough to smell her overpowering perfume. What's your real problem with me, Karen? Is it because I didn't kiss your ass at the neighborhood barbecue? Because I didn't donate to your little landscaping fund? For just a second, her mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating flicker behind those eyes. My problem, John, is people who think rules don't apply to them. People who move into a nice community and then do whatever they want without considering how it affects their neighbors. Those flowers affected nobody. They affected me. Her voice went flat. All the fake sweetness drained out. Every morning when I drive past this house, I see a property that doesn't belong. Roses in November, John. Purple flowers that clash with the whole street's color scheme. It's selfish. Selfish. She called my wife's memorial garden selfish. I felt my hands clench into fists, felt that familiar red haze starting to creep in around the edges of my vision. The same rage that got me in trouble back in high school, back before Sarah taught me how to count to 10 and walk away. But Sarah wasn't here to grab my arm and whisper, "Honey, it's not worth it." "Get off my property," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Karen's smile came back full force. "Already leaving. Have a wonderful day, John. And remember, new landscaping needs to be maintained according to community standards. We'll be checking." She turned and walked back to her sedan, the lawyer trailing behind like a well-trained dog. As they drove away, I stood in my destroyed yard, surrounded by piles of dirt and broken roots, watching the taillights disappear around the corner. You ever feel like you're drowning, but instead of water, it's paperwork and rules and people who smile while they stick the knife in your back? That's when I realized this wasn't about landscaping at all. That afternoon, I drove to the community center with a manila folder full of every document I could find related to my property. The place smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee. A receptionist with purple hair and too many piercings looked up from her computer screen as I walked in. Help you? I need copies of the HOA covenants, the current ones, not some outdated version from 5 years ago. She sighed like I just asked her to solve world hunger. Those are online only. You can access the resident portal with your email. I don't have the login information. Then you'll need to request a password reset. That takes 3 to 5 business days for security verification. 3 to 5 business days. By then, Karen's landscapers would be planting their boring shrubs, and I'd be out $4,000 with no legal recourse. Look, I said, leaning across the counter, my wife died 2 years ago. She handled all this digital stuff. I just need to see what rules I supposedly broke. The girl's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss, but I really can't print anything without proper authorization. The board president would have to approve it. The board president, Karen Drake. I was walking back to my truck when someone called my name. John Harris? I turned around to see a guy about my age, wearing oil-stained coveralls and carrying a toolbox. It took me a second to place him, Frank Kozlov, the electrician who'd rewired Mrs. Peterson's house last spring. Frank, how you doing? Better than you from the looks of it. Heard about your garden this morning. That's some bullshit if you ask me. Word travels fast around here. Frank glanced around the parking lot, then stepped closer. Can I buy you a beer? There's some things you should know about our friend Karen. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a booth at Mickey's Tavern, a dive bar that somehow managed to stay in business despite serving the worst burgers in 3 counties. Frank was nursing a Budweiser, and I was staring at a whiskey I hadn't touched. Karen's been pulling this crap for 2 years now, Frank said, ever since she got elected president. First it was the Millers, said their fence was 6 inches too high, cost them $8,000 to replace it. Then the Johnsons got hit for having the wrong color mailbox. $1,500 for a mailbox, John. And someone's got to be making money off this. That's what I figured too, so I started paying attention. Frank pulled out his phone and scrolled through some photos. 3 weeks ago, I was doing some work over on Elm Street when I saw Karen's Mercedes parked outside Premier Landscaping. You know, the company that's been doing all these emergency repairs around the neighborhood. Premier Landscaping, the same company that had destroyed my garden this morning. She was inside for almost an hour, Frank continued. Then last week, I saw her there again. And here's the kicker. My niece Emma works at City Hall. She mentioned seeing some weird paperwork about your block specifically. Something about property reassessments and development permits. What kind of development permits? Frank shrugged. Emma didn't get a good look, but she said Karen's name was all over the documents, along with some company called Drake Holdings, LLC. Drake Holdings. Karen's last name was Drake. Frank, you think Karen's running some kind of scam? I don't think, John. I know. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I finally took a sip of the whiskey. It burned going down, but it felt good, like waking up after being asleep for 2 years. I'm going to fight this. Good, but you can't do it alone. Karen's got lawyers, she's got the board, she's got connections at City Hall. You're going to need evidence. What kind of evidence? Frank grinned. The kind that shows she's been using her position to funnel business to her own company. The kind that proves she's been targeting specific homeowners for expensive violations that happen to require services from Premier Landscaping. He slid a business card across the table. Emma Kozlov, Assistant City Clerk. My niece gets off work at 5. She might be willing to share what she's seen, if you ask nicely, and if you promise to keep her name out of whatever you're planning. I pocketed the card and finished my whiskey in one burning gulp. Frank, if you're right about this, Karen's not just stealing money. She's stealing people's homes, their memories, everything they've worked for. I know. The question is, are you ready to take down the most powerful person in this neighborhood? Outside Mickey's Tavern, the afternoon sun was already starting to fade. In a few hours, it would be dark, and Karen would be at home, probably planning her next move. Maybe calling more lawyers, or scheduling more emergency landscaping projects. But for the first time since Sarah died, I felt like I had a purpose again. Time to find out what Karen Drake was really up to. Emma Kozlov looked nothing like her Uncle Frank. Where he was all rough edges and motor oil, she was polished and professional, 20-something, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who probably organized her sock drawer by color. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from the neighborhood that nobody would spot us together. She'd agreed to talk, but only if I promised this conversation never happened. "Uncle Frank says you're having trouble with Karen Drake," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. "That's putting it mildly. She destroyed my wife's garden this morning and stuck me with a $4,000 bill." Emma winced. "Yeah, that sounds like her. Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but there's been some weird stuff crossing my desk lately. Papers with Karen's signature, permits that don't quite make sense." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of some official-looking documents. "This came through last month. A rezoning application for your entire block, Pine Street, Maple Avenue, the whole section. Someone wants to change it from residential to mixed-use commercial." Mixed-use commercial. That meant apartments, strip malls, maybe even industrial buildings. The kind of development that would require buying out all the current homeowners first. Who filed the application? Drake Holdings LLC. But here's the thing. The application lists current property values way below market rate, like 30 to 40%, below what houses in your neighborhood actually sell for. How's that possible? Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice. What if someone was artificially driving down property values, making the neighborhood look run down, problematic, full of code violations and unhappy homeowners? What if they were creating problems that didn't exist before? The pieces started clicking together in my head. Karen targeting specific homeowners with expensive violations, forcing people to spend thousands on improvements that made them desperate to sell. Meanwhile, property values dropped because of all the problems in the neighborhood. "She's not just running a landscaping scam," I said. "She's running a land grab." "That's what it looks like to me. And once enough people get fed up and sell their houses cheap, Drake Holdings swoops in and buys everything up at below market prices." "How many homeowners has she hit with these violations?" Emma checked her notes. "In the past year, the Millers, the Johnsons, old Mrs. Peterson, the family on Oak Street, maybe 8 or 9 properties total. And guess what? 3 of them have already sold their houses and moved away. All to the same buyer? Different shell companies, but they all trace back to Drake Holdings eventually." I sat back in my chair, feeling like someone had just punched me in the stomach. Sarah and I had bought our house because we wanted to put down roots somewhere. We'd planned to grow old there, maybe watch grandkids play in that garden she'd worked so hard on. And Karen Drake was systematically destroying that dream, one violation at a time. "Emma, I need you to make copies of those documents." "I can't. They're confidential city records. I could lose my job." "Then I need you to tell me where Karen keeps her records. There's got to be something at her house, some proof that connects her to Premier Landscaping and these shell companies." Emma shook her head. "You're talking about breaking and entering. I can't be part of that." "I'm not asking you to break any laws. I'm just asking for information." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup like the answers were floating in the foam. "There's an HOA board meeting next month," she finally said. "Karen always brings a briefcase full of paperwork, financial reports, contract agreements, all the stuff she doesn't want homeowners to see during regular meetings." "Where does she keep that briefcase?" "How would I know?" "Because you're dating someone who lives in the neighborhood." Emma's face went red. "How did you—" "Lucky guess. Karen's not the only one Frank keeps tabs on." She sighed. "Fine. Yes, I'm seeing David Chen from Willow Street. And yes, he's mentioned that Karen sometimes works late in her home office. The one with the big window facing the street." "What nights?" "Monday and Wednesday, usually. She stays up until midnight going through paperwork, making phone calls. David says the lights are always on when he walks his dog." I pulled out my phone and started typing notes. Monday and Wednesday nights. Home office, big window. "John, whatever you're planning, be careful. Karen's got connections all over the city. She could make a lot of trouble for you if she wanted to." "She's already made trouble for me, Emma. The question is whether I'm going to let her get away with it." Outside the coffee shop, the evening air was sharp with the promise of winter. In a few hours, it would be full dark, and Karen would be at home, probably counting the money she'd made off my wife's destroyed garden. But I had something now that I didn't have this morning. I had a plan. And more importantly, I had proof that Karen Drake wasn't untouchable. She was just another criminal who hadn't been caught yet. Monday night came with a cold rain that turned everything slick and gray. Perfect weather for what I had in mind. Karen's house sat at the end of Birch Lane like a monument to suburban pretension. Oversized colonial with fake shutters and a lawn that probably cost more to maintain than most people's cars. The home office Emma had mentioned was right there in front, a big bay window glowing yellow against the darkness. I parked 3 blocks away and walked back, keeping to the shadows between streetlights. At 68 years old, I wasn't exactly built for covert operations, but 20 years as a county inspector had taught me how to move around properties without being noticed. The window was positioned perfectly. I could see straight into Karen's office from the sidewalk. She was sitting at a massive oak desk, papers spread everywhere, talking on her phone with the kind of animated gestures that meant business. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Through the Rain Street glass, I could see file folders marked with street names: Pine Street, Maple Avenue, Oak Court. The same streets where Karen had been hitting homeowners with violations. She had a whole filing system organized around her land grab scheme. Karen hung up the phone and pulled out what looked like architectural drawings. Even from outside, I could see they were development plans. Parking lots, retail spaces, maybe apartment buildings. She was already planning what to build once she forced everyone out of their homes. That's when I saw something that made my blood freeze. A second folder, thicker than the others, with Memorial Properties written across the tab in red ink. Karen opened it and pulled out a photograph. My house, taken from the street. My wife's garden, the way it looked before this morning's destruction. She'd been planning to target me specifically. This wasn't random enforcement of HOA rules. This was personal. Karen stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, her back turned to the window. I moved closer, trying to get a better view of the documents on her desk. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through my jacket, but I didn't care. She pulled out another folder, this one labeled Premier Contracts, and started reviewing what looked like invoices. I could see dollar amounts, dates, property addresses, everything I needed to prove she was taking kickbacks from the landscaping company. My phone buzzed with a text message. The sudden light from the screen caught Karen's attention, and she looked up sharply toward the window. For a split second, we made eye contact through the rain-streaked glass. Her face went from confusion to recognition to pure rage in about 2 seconds. She dropped the papers and reached for something on her desk, probably her phone, probably calling the police. I turned and ran. At 68, running 3 blocks in the rain while dodging streetlights and parked cars is not something I'd recommend. By the time I reached my truck, my lungs felt like they were on fire and my legs were shaking. But I'd gotten what I came for. Video evidence of Karen's filing system, proof that she'd been targeting specific properties, documentation of her connection to Premier Landscaping. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, catching my breath and reviewing the footage on my phone. It wasn't perfect. Some parts were blurry from the rain, but it was enough to show that Karen Drake was running a systematic scheme to defraud homeowners. That's when I noticed the police car pulling up behind me. The officer who approached my window looked young enough to be my grandson. He had that polite but firm expression cops use when they're trying to figure out if you're dangerous or just stupid. "Evening, sir. Could I see some identification?" I handed over my license, trying to look like an innocent old man who just stopped to check directions. "Something wrong, officer?" "We got a report of someone prowling around the Birch Lane area. Peeping Tom, possibly armed. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Armed? Karen was really pulling out all the stops. "No, sir, I was just heading home from dinner. Stopped to answer a phone call." The officer looked at my license, then at me, then at my phone sitting on the passenger seat. "Mr. Harris, do you live around here?" "Pine Street, about 6 blocks that way." "Mind if I ask what you were doing on Birch Lane? It's not exactly on the way to Pine Street from anywhere." "Think fast, John. Think like Sarah would have. Calm, reasonable, just confused enough to be believable." "Honestly, officer, I think I made a wrong turn. These neighborhood streets all look the same in the rain. Was trying to use my phone's GPS when you pulled up." He handed back my license. "Well, next time, maybe pull over in a more well-lit area. Some folks get nervous when they see strange cars parked in their neighborhoods at night." "Of course, sorry for any trouble." The officer walked back to his patrol car, but he didn't leave. He followed me all the way to Pine Street, watching as I pulled into my driveway and went inside my house. I stood at my kitchen window, watching his headlights disappear around the corner, and realized Karen had just escalated this thing to a whole new level. She wasn't just targeting my property anymore. Now she was trying to get me arrested. But she'd made one crucial mistake. In her panic to call the police, she'd left all those incriminating files spread across her desk, clearly visible from the street. And I had it all on video. The question was, what was I going to do with it? The next morning brought a knock on my door that shattered what was left of my peace of mind. Two men in expensive suits stood on my porch, briefcases in hand, looking like they'd stepped out of a law firm commercial. The older one, silver-haired with predator eyes, handed me a business card. "Mr. Harris, I'm Thomas Brennan from Brennan, Associates. This is my colleague, Mr. Davidson. We represent the Pine Valley Homeowners Association in a matter concerning your property." I looked at the card. The law firm's address was downtown, the kind of place that charged $500 an hour just to shake your hand. "What kind of matter?" "May we come in? This would be better discussed privately." Against my better judgment, I let them into my living room. They sat on my couch like they owned it, pulling out tablets and legal documents with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. "Mr. Harris," Brennan began, "it's come to our client's attention that you were engaged in stalking behavior last night. Specifically, trespassing on private property and attempting to photograph confidential documents through a window." My mouth went dry. "I was on a public sidewalk." "Were you? Because we have security footage showing you leaving the sidewalk and approaching within 3 feet of Mrs. Drake's home office window. That constitutes trespassing under County Ordinance 347B. Davidson opened his tablet and showed me a video clip. There I was, clear as day, standing next to Karen's window with my phone out. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., and the angle made it look like I was practically pressed against the glass. Where did this come from? Mrs. Drake installed a comprehensive security system after several incidents of neighborhood vandalism. Very high-definition cameras, excellent night vision capability. They had me dead to rights, and they knew it. Now, Brennan continued, Mrs. Drake is a reasonable woman. She understands that grief can make people act irrationally. The loss of a spouse, financial stress, the burden of maintaining a property alone, these things can push someone toward poor decisions. What do you want? A simple resolution that benefits everyone. You drop any complaints or legal challenges regarding yesterday's landscaping work. In exchange, Mrs. Drake won't press charges for trespassing, stalking, or attempted burglary. Attempted burglary? Davidson leaned forward. You were observed attempting to photograph confidential HOA documents through a private residence window. That could be construed as reconnaissance for a future break-in. These guys were good. They'd taken my attempt to gather evidence and twisted it into a felony. And if I don't agree? Brennan's smile was sharp as a razor blade. Then you'll be facing criminal charges, a civil lawsuit for harassment, and additional HOA violations that we've recently discovered. Did you know, for instance, that your driveway extends 18 inches beyond the approved property line? That's a surveying violation that carries a $15,000 correction fee. $15,000 on top of the $4,000 for the landscaping, plus legal fees if they press charges. You have 24 hours to decide, Davidson said, standing up. Sign the settlement agreement or face the consequences. They left the papers on my coffee table and walked out like they'd just concluded a routine business meeting. I sat in my living room for an hour, staring at those documents, feeling like the walls were closing in around me. Sarah would have known what to do. She was always the smart one, the one who could see through people's bullshit and find the angle they were trying to hide. But Sarah was gone, and I was on my own. That's when my phone rang, Frank's number. John, you need to get down to Mickey's Tavern right now. Emma's here, and she's got something you need to see. Frank, I can't. Karen's lawyers just... Trust me, John, this changes everything. 20 minutes later, I was back in that same booth at Mickey's, staring at Emma's laptop screen while she pulled up city records. After what happened last night, I did some more digging, she said, and I found something Karen probably wishes stayed buried. She clicked through several screens of property records, tax assessments, and business filings. Remember Drake Holdings LLC, the company that's been buying up all these discounted properties? Well, It turns out Karen Drake isn't the only owner. Emma pointed to a document showing the corporate structure. Look at the registered partners. My eyes scanned down the list of names and stopped cold. Thomas Brennan, the lawyer who just threatened me in my own living room. He's not just Karen's attorney, Emma continued. He's her business partner. They've been splitting the profits from this land grab scheme 50-50. Frank whistled low. No wonder he showed up so fast with all that legal firepower. There's more, Emma said. I pulled the permits for Premier Landscaping. Guess who's listed as a silent partner in that company too? The same name, Thomas Brennan. They weren't just running a simple HOA scam. They'd created an entire ecosystem of corruption. The HOA creates violations, the landscaping company profits from mandatory fixes, the law firm intimidates anyone who fights back, and Drake Holdings buys up the properties when homeowners can't afford to stay. Emma, can you print all of this? She shook her head. I've already risked too much, but I can tell you where to find public records that prove everything I just showed you. She handed me a piece of paper with addresses and filing numbers. County Clerk's Office, Business Licensing Division, and the State Corporate Registry. It's all there if you know where to look. I folded the paper and put it in my wallet. For the first time in 2 days, I felt like I had a real weapon to fight back with. One more thing, Emma said. That settlement agreement they brought you, it's not legally binding if it's based on fraud or extortion. And threatening to file false charges to force someone to sign a contract, that's textbook extortion. Frank grinned. Sounds like Karen and her lawyer friend just made a big mistake. Outside Mickey's Tavern, the afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds for the first time all week. I had 20 hours left to make a decision about Karen's ultimatum, but now I knew something she didn't know I knew. Her lawyer wasn't just representing her. He was stealing alongside her, and that changed everything. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they used to be, but I climbed them with more purpose than I'd felt in years. I'd spent the entire night at the county clerk's office, photocopying documents, cross-referencing business filings, and building a case that would have made Sarah proud. By morning, I had a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse, filled with proof of Karen and Brennan's entire operation. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting to address recent security concerns in the neighborhood, her polite way of trying to get me kicked out before I could expose her scheme. I walked into the community center conference room to find 15 neighbors already seated, most of them looking at me like I was the problem. Karen sat at the head of the table in her power suit, that same predatory smile plastered across her face. Brennan stood behind her like a guard dog in an expensive tie. Thank you all for coming, Karen began. Unfortunately, we're here to discuss some disturbing behavior by one of our residents. John Harris has been engaging in stalking, trespassing, and harassment of board members. Murmurs around the table. Mrs. Peterson shook her head sadly. The Chens whispered to each other in Mandarin. Now, we don't want to involve law enforcement if we can avoid it, Karen continued. But the safety of our community has to come first. She was setting me up for exile, get the neighbors to vote me out. Then she could seize my property for abandonment of HOA obligations. I stood up, my folder in hand. Before we talk about safety, maybe we should talk about fraud. Brennan stepped forward. Mr. Harris, you're out of order. This is a closed hearing regarding your violations. Funny thing about violations, Tom. I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. According to the State Business Registry, you're not just Karen's lawyer, you're her business partner. I placed the corporate filing on the table where everyone could see it. Drake Holdings, LLC, 50-50 ownership between Karen Drake and Thomas Brennan. The room went quiet. Karen's smile flickered. That's not relevant to... Brennan started. Oh, it's relevant. I pulled out more papers. Because Drake Holdings has been buying up properties in this neighborhood at below market prices. Properties that just happen to be hit with expensive HOA violations first. I spread the documents across the table like playing cards. Property transfers, violation notices, purchase agreements, all connected, all showing the same pattern. The Millers got hit with an $8,000 fence violation, then sold their house to Phoenix Realty LLC, a subsidiary of Drake Holdings. The Johnsons paid $1,500 for a new mailbox, then sold to Sunrise Properties, Inc., another Drake Holdings shell company. Mrs. Peterson leaned forward, studying the papers. Are you saying Karen's been stealing houses? I'm saying she's been manufacturing violations to drive down property values, then buying the houses cheap when people can't afford to fight back. Karen finally found her voice. This is ridiculous conspiracy nonsense. John's clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. Then explain this. I pulled out the premier landscaping contracts. Your boyfriend Tom here is also a partner in the landscaping company that's been doing all these emergency repairs. Every violation Karen creates, Brennan's company profits from. The room erupted. Neighbors started talking over each other, demanding explanations, asking how long this had been going on. That's enough! Brennan slammed his hand on the table. Mr. Harris, you obtained these documents through illegal surveillance and trespassing. Nothing you've presented here is admissible. Admissible where, Tom? This isn't a court of law. This is a neighborhood meeting. I turned to face my neighbors. These people have been stealing from all of us. They created fake violations, charged us thousands of dollars for unnecessary work, then bought our houses for pennies when we couldn't afford to stay. You have no proof? Karen started. I have video of you reviewing development plans for this entire block. I have financial records showing kickbacks from Premier Landscaping, and I have testimony from a city employee who's seen the rezoning applications you filed under fake company names. That last part was a bluff. Emma had never agreed to testify, but Karen didn't know that. Her face went white. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen Drake looked genuinely afraid. The question is, I continued, what are we going to do about it? Mrs. Peterson stood up slowly. I moved to remove Karen Drake from the board immediately, pending a full investigation. Seconded, said Mr. Chen. All in favor? 14 hands went up. Only Karen abstained. Brennan grabbed his briefcase. This is harassment. We'll be filing charges. No, Tom, you won't. I pulled out one final document, the extortion statute I'd looked up at 3 a.m. Because threatening to file false charges to force someone to sign a contract, that's a felony. And I recorded our entire conversation yesterday. I hadn't actually recorded anything, but Brennan didn't know that either. He and Karen exchanged glances, and I saw something pass between them, the recognition that their perfect scheme had just collapsed like a house of cards. They left the community center in silence, probably already planning how to liquidate their assets before the real investigation started. 3 weeks later, I was standing in my front yard, planting new flowers where Sarah's garden used to be. Different varieties this time, hardier plants that could survive whatever came next. The landscaping company had offered to restore the original garden for free, part of their settlement agreement with the county prosecutor. Frank walked over from across the street, carrying 2 beers and wearing his usual oil-stained grin. He'd heard Karen's house went up for sale, he said. Good, maybe the new neighbors will be an improvement. He handed me a beer, and we stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over a neighborhood that finally felt like home again. You know what I learned through all this? Sometimes the people who smile the most are the ones you need to watch the closest. And sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, all you need is one person willing to stand up and say, not today. Karen Drake thought she could steal my wife's memory along with my money. She thought an old widower would be too broken to fight back. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about a lot of things. If this story hits close to home, there are good people out there fighting the same fight. Don't let the Karens of the world win. Sometimes all it takes is asking the right questions and refusing to back down. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. Trust me, the truth always finds a way out, even when powerful people try to bury it, especially then.